In a world roaring with noise and fleeting promises that vanish like smoke on a midnight highway, it isn't grand gestures or desperate pleas that hold a woman's heart. It's a warm embrace, a steady soul, a quiet gravity that makes her breathe deeper and stay a little longer. To make her happy, to keep her close, isn't about power or binding vows. It's about stillness, self-mastery, and a love without chains. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This is the story of a Stoic man who kept love alive by first holding fast to himself. 1. Opening story. James and Emily. The little coastal town in Maine wore autumn like a well-loved quilt, reds and ambers tumbling across the hills and the salty wind carrying the hush of waves to every porch light still glowing after dusk. James had always loved this season, the way the air tasted like apples and possibility. But that night, the crisp air bit a little sharper. Inside their small house near the harbor, James sat across from Emily, the woman whose laughter had once made every storm feel survivable. Her auburn hair caught the soft glow of the kitchen lamp, and her fingers curled around a mug as if it might anchor her. They had been together 5 years. 5 years of shared secrets, grocery lists scribbled on napkins, and lazy, Sunday mornings tangled in each other's dreams. But lately, work deadlines had eaten through their dinners, and small misunderstandings had grown teeth. James could feel the space between them widening, silent and cold. Emily's voice broke the quiet. It wasn't loud, just trembling enough to shift the ground beneath him. "I don't know if we're still on the same road anymore." The words landed like stones in his chest. 100 instincts surged, plead with her, promise her change, bury her doubt beneath a mountain of apologies. But then, almost like a whisper from somewhere wiser, a line he'd underlined in an old book came to him. "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Epictetus, steady and timeless. James inhaled slowly, the way he did before casting a fishing line or stepping into freezing water. The ache in his throat wanted to break into words, but he held it. He let the moment breathe, and when he finally spoke, his voice was gentle, stripped of panic. "I hear you. I need to think. I want to understand you, not argue with you." The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was fragile, alive, like the pause between a heartbeat and the next. Outside, the waves kept their rhythm against the rocks. Inside, a man chose stillness over fear. In love, Stoicism isn't coldness. It's a calm heart that refuses to shatter what is precious. 2. The power of self-control. The next morning, the sunlight spilled over Portland's harbor like honey, soft and slow, gilding the fishing boats that rocked gently against their ropes. James woke to the smell of salt and the memory of Emily's trembling voice. For a moment, his hand hovered over his phone. The urge to send a dozen messages, to explain himself, to beg for another chance tugged at him like an undertow. But he didn't. Instead, he swung his legs out of bed and laced up his running shoes. The pavement by the coast was damp with dew, and as he jogged along the jagged shoreline, the world seemed bigger than his fear. The Atlantic wind pressed cold against his skin, and each breath burned with something cleansing. With every step, he thought of Marcus Aurelius, the emperor-philosopher whose words had steadied men for centuries. "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." James let those words settle deep. He couldn't control Emily's heart. He couldn't command her feelings or silence her doubts. But he could control himself. He could choose honesty over panic, patience over desperate pleading. He could choose to be the man worth loving, not by grasping tighter, but by standing steadier. Later, back at his small kitchen table, the one they'd shared 100 quiet breakfasts at, he opened his journal. His handwriting wavered as he wrote about his fear, his love, his mistakes. He didn't dress them up or soften the edges. Seeing the truth on paper steadied him. He realized that love isn't about trapping someone with fear of losing you. It's about creating a life, a presence, a warmth so genuine that they want to stay. As the day stretched on, the harbor bustled and the gulls cried overhead. James felt a strange calm seep through him. Emily's choice was her own. His task wasn't to cage her, but to cultivate himself. To be the kind of man whose peace, integrity, and quiet strength made her heart feel at home. A woman doesn't stay because you hold her tightly. She stays because, with you, the world feels just a little more like where she belongs. 3. Emotional climax. The Café meeting. The little cafe on 4th Street smelled of roasted beans and memories. A week had passed since the words that shook them, and the October wind outside teased fallen leaves along the cobblestones. James arrived early, the worn wooden tables and chalkboard menu pulling him back to the night 5 years ago when Emily's laughter had first tangled with his heartbeat. He didn't rehearse a speech. He didn't draft apologies or strategies. He only brought a heart that had found its quiet center. When Emily walked in, the bell over the door gave a soft chime, fragile as glass. Her eyes searched the room, cautious, a shield half raised. She sat across from him, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. The silence between them was alive, full of all the things left unsaid. James met her gaze, steady and warm. "I love you," he began, his voice low but unwavering. "But I also love the truth, that we both deserve happiness. I won't hold you with fear, and I won't build our future on chains. I want to walk beside you, not bind you." The words landed gently, without demand. For a heartbeat, Emily didn't move. Then her shoulders softened, and tears welled up, spilling before she could stop them. She cried, not from panic or despair, but from the sudden, piercing recognition of the man before her. In that moment, she saw the depth she had fallen for years ago, a man who loved her fiercely enough to honor her freedom. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane, but inside, something shifted. The room seemed warmer, the air softer, as if the universe itself had exhaled. Emily reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly, and James took it without a word. Stoicism, she realized, hadn't drained him of passion. It had refined it, polished it, turned love into something pure, something that did not cling or control, but chose, every day, to stay. In his stillness, she felt more wanted than any desperate plea could have made her feel. And in her tears, James understood. Love's truest strength is the freedom it gives. 4. Life lessons. In the sprawling heat of Dallas, where the sun lays gold across endless highways, Michael and Sarah once stood on the edge of breaking. Their marriage had weathered storms, bills that came too fast, jobs that left them drained, and arguments that spun out like Texas twisters. But somewhere between the noise and the silence, they chose to try again, not by clinging harder, but by changing the way they stood beside each other. Every morning, over coffee that steamed against their kitchen window, they began to write small lists of gratitude. Some days it was simple. The way sunlight caught Sarah's hair, Michael fixing the leaky faucet without complaint, the sound of their daughter's laughter. Other days it was the hard things, thanking life for the lessons inside the fights, for the bruised moments that taught them tenderness. Slowly, the habit softened the edges between them. They stopped keeping score. Michael no longer raised his voice to drown out hers. Sarah no longer sharpened her words to win. Instead, they listened. Truly listened. Sarah told a friend once, her voice touched with awe, "Michael doesn't shout anymore. He doesn't defend himself at every turn. He just listens. He's become the safe harbor I didn't know I needed." Seneca's wisdom lingered in Michael's mind. True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. He began to understand that Sarah's joy was not a gift to be bought, not a promise carved in grand declarations. It lived in the ordinary, the way he reached for her hand without thinking, the way he looked at her fully when she spoke, the way his presence told her she was seen. Their love wasn't rebuilt through sweeping gestures or cinematic reconciliations. It was reborn quietly, in the soft spaces between breaths and the shared smiles over mundane tasks. Love, they discovered, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's simply choosing, again and again, to be there, present and whole, in the small, unremarkable moments that become everything. 5. A message to men. Stoicism does not ask a man to become a statue, cold and unfeeling. It asks him to become deliberate, to know when silence speaks louder than words, when a single sentence can heal more than 1,000 apologies, and when an embrace, the right kind of embrace, can remind a woman she is safe. Strength is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it, the choice to guide rather than be ruled by it. Control what is yours, your attitude, your kindness, your loyalty. Let go of what is not, the unpredictable shifts of the world, the moods of a day, the choices that belong to another heart. There is a kind of quiet courage in trusting life to unfold and in trusting yourself to remain steady as it does. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." It is a call to action, not for grand battles or showy declarations, but for the daily practice of integrity. Be the man you would respect if you were standing outside yourself. Be the man who meets difficulty with calm, who treats love as a privilege rather than a possession. A woman does not stay because she fears the empty space beside her pillow. She stays because your presence makes her world richer, because you create a place where her laughter rings brighter and her sorrows weigh less. She chooses you again and again, not out of desperation, but out of joy. Holding on to love is not about chains or control. It is about open hands and a steady heart, about being rooted enough that she can wander without losing the way back to you. True strength is the freedom you offer, a freedom that draws her closer, not because she must, but because she cannot imagine a life where she would rather be. 6. The emotional ending. The California coastline blushed under the setting sun, the sky awash in peach and lavender, the ocean whispering against the sand like a secret only lovers could hear. James and Emily walked hand in hand, their fingers twined with a familiarity that felt both old and entirely new. The air smelled of salt and promise, and each step they took was unhurried, as if time itself had loosened its grip. They had not arrived here because James had reshaped Emily or bent her to his will. She was still the same woman, with her auburn hair catching the dying light, her laughter quick and bright, as seagulls skimming the waves. What changed was James. He had learned to steady his own heartbeat, to hold his tongue when anger flickered, to trust the quiet strength inside him rather than the fragile control outside. Emily's happiness wasn't born from being managed or caged. It bloomed because she felt free to be herself, to love without fear, to walk beside a man who knew that control over another person is an illusion. James understood now that the only power worth claiming was power over himself. The waves rolled in, soft and endless, a reminder of how love moves, sometimes wild, sometimes calm, but always alive. In the fading light, James glanced at Emily and saw not possession, but partnership. And she saw in him not a desperate grip, but a safe harbor. In a world where hearts bruise easily and promises dissolve like mist, Stoicism teaches that true strength is never in forcing someone to stay. It is in becoming the kind of soul no one wishes to leave. Love is not a battlefield to be won or lost. It is an art, a beautiful, deliberate way of living, practiced by the man who can keep peace in the storm, who can love without chains, and who knows that happiness is not power over another, but the gift of presence, quiet and unwavering beside them.